Tom liked living a simple life. During the week, he worked at an office in the city, surrounded by tall buildings, busy traffic, and endless noise. By Friday evening, he was always tired. That was why he loved his small cabin in the woods. It was about an hour's drive from his apartment, far enough to feel like another world. The cabin stood on a hill, with trees all around and a small stream nearby. Birds sang in the morning, crickets chirped at night, and the air always felt fresh and clean. Tom had bought the cabin years ago with his savings. It was not big or fancy, but it was strong and comfortable. He had built a small shed next to it for tools and a wooden fence to mark the edge of his land. To him, the cabin was perfect. He could spend weekends fishing, reading, or sitting by the fire with a warm cup of tea. The place gave him peace, something he could not find in the crowded city. But there was one problem. The land around the cabin was technically part of a neighborhood run by a homeowners association, often called the HOA. Tom never paid much attention to them because he did not live there full time. The HOA cared about rules, appearances, and control. They wanted every house to look the same, every lawn trimmed to the same height, and every fence painted the same color. Tom, on the other hand, liked things natural. He let the grass grow wild, he painted his fence dark brown instead of white, and his shed was old but useful. At first, Tom did not notice that the HOA had taken interest in his cabin. He thought they would not care much about a small place in the woods that was not even occupied year-round. But the letters started to arrive. The first one came in spring. It said his fence was against community standards. The second came in summer, this time about his shed being an eyesore. By autumn, he was receiving notes about his lawn, his mailbox, and even the color of his cabin door. Tom found the letters annoying but not serious. He thought if he ignored them, the HOA would lose interest. He did not break any laws, and the cabin was his property. Still, the letters became more frequent. They were no longer just polite notices. Some had bold red stamps saying "Final Warning." Others hinted at fines or penalties. Tom shrugged them off. He had more important things to do than argue with neighbors who barely knew him. One evening, while he was chopping wood, Tom noticed a car parked at the edge of the road near his cabin. Two people inside seemed to be writing something on clipboards. When he walked closer, the car drove away quickly. A few days later, he received another letter, this one much harsher than before. It said he was ignoring the authority of the HOA and that action would be taken soon. For the first time, Tom felt uneasy. He had heard stories of HOAs being strict, but this seemed extreme. Why were they so focused on his cabin? It was not harming anyone. He thought about calling a lawyer, but since he only used the cabin on weekends, he decided to wait and see what would happen. Tom tried to shake off the worry and enjoy his retreat. That Saturday, he woke up early, made coffee, and stepped outside. The forest looked golden under the rising sun. A deer walked slowly across the stream, and the air smelled of pine. He reminded himself that this was why he had bought the cabin. No amount of letters could take away the peace he felt here. Yet, at the back of his mind, he could not forget the last note. The words "action will be taken" echoed in his thoughts. He wondered what that meant. A fine? A lawsuit? Or something else? He closed the letter in a drawer and told himself not to overthink. Still, he could not shake the strange feeling that the HOA was planning something unusual, something beyond ordinary rules. The cabin, once his safe place, now carried a shadow of worry. Tom did not know it yet, but the peaceful days were about to change. The HOA was preparing a move that would not only surprise him but also put him in the middle of an unexpected and dangerous situation. The following weeks brought more surprises for Tom. Each time he returned to his cabin, a new letter was waiting. They were always folded neatly, slipped under his door or placed in his small mailbox. At first, Tom thought it was almost amusing. He imagined some HOA member driving all the way out just to drop these notes. But the more he read them, the less he laughed. The tone of the letters was no longer just strict, it was sharp, almost threatening. One paper said his mailbox was a violation of community pride. Another accused him of ignoring legal obligations. A different one stated that his property could be taken under review if he continued to disobey. Tom shook his head each time, muttering to himself that it was nonsense. Still, he could not deny how persistent the HOA was becoming. One evening, Tom sat at his wooden table with a stack of these letters in front of him. He read them one after another, trying to understand their true purpose. None of them mentioned specific laws or official regulations, just vague claims about community standards. He realized they wanted him to feel cornered. The HOA was using words to pressure him, hoping he would grow tired and give up the cabin. Tom had no plan of giving up. The cabin meant too much to him. It was not just a building in the woods, it was his safe place. Every board, every nail, every stone path held his effort and his memories. Selling it because a group of people disliked his fence or mailbox was out of the question. But the HOA seemed to know this. Their letters soon changed again. One was written in bold letters that said, "This is your last chance." Another said, "You will face direct action." These words made Tom pause. He stared at the paper for a long time, feeling a strange chill. What did they mean by direct action? Did they plan to fine him heavily? Could they drag him to court? He did not know, but the wording felt unusual. The very next weekend, Tom noticed something else. As he drove up the dirt road toward his cabin, he saw another car parked near the trees. This was the second time in a month. The vehicle had tinted windows, and though Tom slowed down to look, he could not see who was inside. When he pulled into his driveway and stepped out, the car started and rolled away. Dust rose from the road as it disappeared into the distance. That night, Tom could not sleep well. He sat by the fireplace, staring at the flames. The letters were troubling enough, but the strange cars added a new layer of worry. It was one thing for people to send notes, but another to follow him around. He wondered if the HOA had hired someone to watch him. The thought was unsettling, but he reminded himself that he had done nothing wrong. The next morning, Tom found yet another letter on his porch. This one was different. The handwriting was rushed, and the paper was not official. It read, "You have ignored all warnings. Be ready. Officials will arrive soon." For the first time, Tom felt real anger rising in him. He slammed the paper on the table. Whoever was behind this had gone too far. Pretending to send officials was not only ridiculous but also dishonest. He thought about reporting it to the local sheriff, but then he stopped. Without knowing who was sending the letters, what proof did he really have? All he had were vague words and suspicious cars. Still, Tom refused to let fear control him. He went about his weekend as usual. He chopped firewood, cleaned the shed, and repaired a loose step near the porch. But every sound from the road made him turn his head. Each time the wind rustled the trees, he wondered if someone was out there watching. On Sunday evening, Tom packed his bag and locked the cabin door before heading back to the city. As he drove away, he kept replaying the words from the last letter in his mind, "Officials will arrive soon." He tried to laugh it off, telling himself it was just another empty threat. Yet deep down, he felt that the situation was slowly moving beyond simple notes. Something larger was being planned, something he had not imagined. What Tom did not know was that the HOA had already taken their next step. Plans were in motion, and the so-called officials would be arriving sooner than he thought. The weekend arrived again, and Tom drove back to his cabin with mixed feelings. The sun was bright, the forest air was crisp, but his mind was heavy. The last letter still bothered him. It had spoken of officials arriving soon, and though he tried to dismiss it, he could not forget those words. When he reached the cabin, everything looked normal. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, birds hopped across the grass, and the stream sparkled in the afternoon sun. Tom unloaded his bag and groceries, then sat on the porch with a book. For a while, the peace of the forest calmed him, and he began to think that perhaps the threats were empty after all. But the calm did not last long. The next morning, just after Tom poured himself a cup of coffee, there was a loud knock on the cabin door. It was not the friendly knock of a neighbor, but a heavy, forceful pounding that made the wooden door rattle. Tom froze, his cup still in hand. He set it down slowly, walked to the door, and looked through the small window. Two men stood outside. Both wore uniforms that looked like police clothing, though the fabric seemed cheap and the badges glinted strangely in the light. One man was tall with sharp features, the other shorter with a stiff posture. They both wore dark sunglasses, even though the morning sun was soft. Tom opened the door halfway. "Can I help you?" he asked calmly. The taller man spoke first. His voice was deep but lacked the confidence of real authority. "We are here on official business. You are required to come with us for non-compliance with community regulations." Tom blinked. "Community regulations? What do you mean?" The shorter man stepped forward. "You have ignored repeated notices from the Homeowners Association. You are under arrest. Come with us now." Tom studied their badges more carefully. The designs were vague, with no clear name of a department. He had seen real officers before, and these did not look the same. Something about their belts and boots also felt off. He stayed calm. "If you are real officers, then you will not mind if I call the sheriff's office to confirm. Please wait here." The tall man shifted uncomfortably. "That will not be necessary. We are authorized to act right now." Tom shook his head. "I'm not stepping outside until I know who you are." Before they could respond, he closed the door firmly and locked it. His heart beat fast, but his mind was clear. He reached for his phone and quickly dialed 911. The operator answered, and Tom explained the situation. Two men in fake uniforms were outside his cabin, claiming to arrest him over HOA rules. The operator told him to stay inside and stay safe. Help would be sent immediately. Outside, the men knocked harder, now shouting, "Open the door. Do not resist." Their voices were louder, but Tom did not move. He stayed near the back of the cabin, away from the windows, phone still in hand. Minutes felt like hours as the men continued to shout. At one point, the shorter one tried to rattle the doorknob, but the lock held firm. Tom could hear them talking to each other in low voices, as if unsure what to do next. Then, something unexpected happened. In the distance, Tom heard the sound of engines. Multiple vehicles were approaching, their tires crunching against the gravel road. The shouting outside stopped suddenly. Tom peeked through a small crack in the curtain. Black SUVs rolled up near the cabin, and men in real tactical gear stepped out quickly and confidently. Their vests had clear letters that read FBI. They moved in perfect formation, surrounding the cabin and the two imposters. The fake officers stiffened, their faces pale. One of them raised his hand slowly. The other looked ready to run, but there was nowhere to go. Within seconds, real agents had them on the ground, their fake badges taken away, their wrists in handcuffs. Tom watched in shock, still clutching his phone. He had expected the sheriff's office, but not a full FBI team. He slowly opened his door, and one of the agents looked at him firmly but kindly. "Sir, are you safe? We'll need your statement." Tom nodded, still processing what had just happened. The men who had tried to scare him into leaving his cabin had walked straight into something much bigger than they expected. What Tom did not know yet was that the forest around his cabin was not as quiet as it seemed. A secret FBI drill had been taking place nearby, and the imposters had stumbled right into the middle of it. The sight outside Tom's cabin was almost unreal. Only minutes ago, two men in fake uniforms were pounding on his door, demanding he follow them. Now those same men lay face down on the ground, surrounded by real agents with steady movements and sharp commands. The calm forest had turned into the center of a serious operation. Tom stood at the doorway, unsure if he should step outside or stay back. One of the agents, a tall woman with clear markings on her vest, walked up to him. She held her hand out in a reassuring way. "You're safe, sir. Please remain calm. We'll handle everything from here." Tom nodded, though his heart still raced. "Who are they?" he asked, pointing toward the two men who were being searched. "They are imposters," the agent replied firmly. "And it looks like they picked the wrong place and the wrong time. You're lucky, sir. This area is currently part of a federal training drill. That's why we arrived so quickly." Tom blinked in surprise. "A drill? Here, in the forest?" "Yes," she explained. "Our team is practicing detection of fake identification and unlawful impersonation. We set up this location weeks ago for exercises. When your 911 call came in, it was flagged right away, and we were less than a mile away." As she spoke, Tom realized the strange twist of fate. The HOA had sent imposters to intimidate him, but without knowing, they had marched straight into the middle of a real FBI drill. The agents moved with precision. Some checked the imposters' fake badges and uniforms, laying them out on the hood of a vehicle. Others spoke into radios, reporting the situation. One agent opened a black case and began collecting the fake IDs as evidence. The imposters sat with their hands tied, their faces pale. Tom stepped closer, still in disbelief. "They said they were here to arrest me over HOA rules." "Who does that?" The female agent looked at him carefully. "That is exactly what we intend to find out. Do you have any idea who might have sent them?" Tom sighed. "The HOA has been harassing me for months. Letters, threats, even people watching from cars. I ignored it because I thought it was only words. But now it's gone too far." The agent nodded and wrote something in a small notebook. "It seems the association or someone within it has escalated matters. This is not a simple dispute anymore. Impersonating law officers is a federal crime." Another agent walked over with a folder he had taken from one of the imposters. "Look at this," he said. "It contains copies of property records, including details about this cabin. Someone clearly gave them inside information." Tom's stomach tightened. The thought that strangers had been digging into his life without permission was disturbing. He clenched his fists but kept his voice steady. All this because I painted my fence a different color and didn't mow my grass. This is madness. The female agent gave a faint smile, though her eyes remained serious. Sometimes, small disputes reveal bigger problems. You did the right thing by calling. If you had stepped outside with them, this could have ended very differently. Tom felt a chill run through him. He had nearly followed them, thinking for a moment they might be real. His decision to stay calm and make a call had saved him. The FBI team stayed at the cabin for hours, documenting everything. They took photographs of the fake uniforms, collected the letters Tom had saved, and recorded his statement. The imposters were taken away in the SUVs, still silent and defeated. The forest, which had echoed with shouting and commands, slowly grew quiet again. By the time the sun began to set, only a few agents remained. The female agent approached Tom one last time. "We'll continue the investigation. It may take weeks, but rest assured, this is no longer just an HOA matter. You'll be contacted soon for updates. Until then, stay alert." Tom thanked her, though his thoughts were heavy. He watched as the final vehicles drove away, their tail lights vanishing into the trees. The silence of the forest returned, but it felt different now. His cabin, once a place of peace, had become part of a larger story. As Tom closed the door and sat by the fire, he realized that the situation was far from over. The imposters had been caught, but the people who sent them were still out there. The HOA's plan had failed today, but what would they try next? The imposters had been taken away, and Tom finally felt a sense of relief. But he knew the situation was not over. The letters, the strange cars, and now the people pretending to be officers, all of it pointed to a single truth: someone was trying to scare him. And though the FBI had intervened, the people behind the plan were still out there, watching, waiting for their next move. That evening, Tom made sure every lock on his cabin was secure. He double-checked the windows, the shed, and even the small gate at the edge of his property. For the first time, he realized that his quiet retreat had been vulnerable all along. The thought made him uneasy, but he refused to let fear take over. The next morning, the forest was calm again. Sunlight filtered through the tall trees, casting gentle shadows on the cabin. Tom brewed a strong cup of coffee and stepped onto the porch, keeping a watchful eye on the road. It was a beautiful day, yet his mind could not relax. He knew the HOA members who had orchestrated this were bold enough to try again. Suddenly, movement caught his attention. A car slowly approached along the dirt road. Tom's pulse quickened. Was it another imposter? He grabbed his phone and was ready to call for help. But as the vehicle got closer, he saw something unexpected. Black SUVs with dark-tinted windows followed the car, and men in tactical gear began moving into position along the tree line. Tom realized immediately that this was the FBI again. They had not left the area completely. Perhaps they had anticipated that those behind the plan might try something new. Relief and astonishment filled him. The imposters had walked straight into a real federal operation without knowing it, and now it seemed the final pieces of the plan were falling into place. The car in the distance slowed, and two men stepped out. They looked ordinary at first, business-like clothing, neat hair, but the FBI agents moved quickly, surrounding them without a single wasted movement. Tom watched as one agent whispered into a radio, and then the men were carefully guided toward the SUVs. It was clear that these men were connected to the imposters from before. One of the FBI agents approached Tom. "Sir, you did the right thing by staying calm and calling us. These men were sent to intimidate you." Their attempt has failed. Tom's heart pounded. You mean the HOA? They actually hired people to pretend to be officers. The agent nodded. Yes. This is far more serious than a simple neighborhood dispute. Impersonating law officers is illegal. These men were part of a conspiracy to pressure you into compliance or to leave your property. You are safe now, but the investigation will continue until those responsible are held accountable. Tom felt a mixture of shock and anger. He had known the HOA could be strict, but he had never imagined they would go this far. All because of his fence, his shed, and a few letters he had ignored. His cabin, his peaceful retreat, had become a battlefield he never asked for. While the FBI secured the scene, Tom moved carefully around the porch, watching as agents gathered evidence, fake badges, letters, and even photographs taken by the imposters. Every detail mattered, and the precision of the agents impressed him. They were organized, focused, and confident, leaving nothing to chance. By late afternoon, the imposters and their handlers had been taken into custody. The SUVs rolled away, leaving the forest silent once again. Tom walked to the edge of the property and looked at the trees, the stream, and the cabin that had been his safe haven. Now it felt different. He realized that his peaceful retreat had been targeted, but he also understood that staying calm, making smart decisions, and calling for help had changed the outcome. As the sun began to set, Tom returned to the cabin and sat by the fireplace. The crackling flames warmed him, but he could not stop thinking about what had happened. The imposters had been caught, and the trap had closed, but the people behind the plan, the HOA leaders, were still out there, facing the consequences of their actions. For the first time since the letters began, Tom allowed himself to feel a small sense of victory. The forest was quiet again, and he had survived the danger without losing control. His cabin had withstood the test, and so had he. Yet, he knew this was only the beginning of the story. The real work, making sure the people behind the scheme were held responsible, was still ahead. And Tom was ready to see it through. The morning after the FBI operation, Tom woke to a quiet forest. The sun streamed through the tall pine trees, casting golden light across the cabin porch. For the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of calm. But he knew the situation was far from over. The imposters were gone, but the people who had sent them, the HOA leaders, were still out there. By mid-morning, FBI agents returned to the cabin with folders, notebooks, and evidence bags. One of them, a tall man named Agent Harris, spoke directly to Tom. "Sir, we will need to go over all the letters, notes, and anything unusual you have seen in the past months. Every detail could help us uncover who organized this scheme." Tom nodded and brought out the stack of letters he had saved over the last few months. The agents carefully examined each one. Some were typed, others handwritten, but all carried the same pattern, a thinly veiled threat disguised as HOA authority. Agent Harris looked at Tom. "This is serious. Whoever did this attempted to impersonate law officers to intimidate you. That is a federal offense. The people behind it will face consequences." As the agents worked, Tom told them everything he remembered. He described the cars parked near the cabin, the strangers observing from a distance, and every letter he had received. He also mentioned small details that seemed insignificant at the time: the type of envelopes, the handwriting on some notes, and the fact that the imposters seemed nervous and unprofessional. The agents nodded, taking notes. "These details will help us connect the imposters to the HOA leaders," one said. "Sometimes, the smallest things reveal the biggest clues." By late afternoon, the FBI had traced phone records and emails linked to the imposters. They found messages sent from HOA office accounts and instructions on how to approach Tom's cabin. Every step had been planned, but their arrogance had been their downfall. They had underestimated the persistence of federal training exercises and Tom's quick thinking. Tom watched as agents carefully explained the next steps. "We will need to confront the HOA leaders soon. They attempted to commit fraud and harassment. Impersonating law enforcement is not something taken lightly. Their scheme is completely illegal." Tom felt a mix of relief and disbelief. All this had started because the HOA did not like how he painted his fence or managed his property. Now, the scheme had escalated into a federal investigation. "I never imagined it would get this serious," he said. "I just wanted to enjoy my cabin in peace." Agent Harris smiled faintly. Sometimes, simple disagreements can reveal the true character of people. Those who act in secret, thinking they can control others, often overestimate their power. "You did the right thing by staying calm and calling us immediately." Over the next few days, FBI agents returned multiple times to gather more evidence. They took photographs, collected additional documents, and interviewed witnesses. Slowly, the pattern became clear. Several HOA leaders had coordinated the plan, hiring imposters to intimidate Tom. They believed that fear would force him to sell or abandon his cabin. Instead, their scheme had collapsed in the most unexpected way. The unmasking of the HOA leaders was swift and precise. When agents confronted them, they were shocked by the evidence. Fake badges, letters, email messages, and phone records left no room for excuses. They tried to deny involvement, but the facts were undeniable. The HOA's attempt to pressure Tom had backfired completely. Tom, watching from a distance, felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The people who had tried to scare him were now facing the consequences of their actions. His cabin, his peaceful retreat, had not only survived but had become a symbol of standing firm against intimidation. By the evening, the forest was calm again. Tom returned to his porch, sipping tea and watching the sunset reflect on the stream. He thought about the weeks of stress and uncertainty and realized how important it was to remain calm and observant in difficult situations. His actions, simple but decisive, had ensured his safety and brought the truth to light. For the first time since this ordeal began, Tom smiled. Justice was being served, and he could finally feel the true peace of his cabin. The days after the FBI unmasked the HOA leaders were filled with official letters and news reports. Tom continued visiting his cabin, but now he went with a new sense of confidence. He had survived an unusual and stressful situation, and the people who had tried to intimidate him were now facing the consequences of their actions. The local authorities and the FBI worked together to ensure the HOA leaders were held accountable. Court dates were scheduled, investigations continued, and every piece of evidence from the imposters, the letters, and the emails was reviewed. Tom stayed involved, answering questions and providing statements whenever necessary. He realized how important it was to cooperate fully. His actions could ensure that such illegal schemes were stopped completely. Despite the stress, Tom returned to his cabin whenever he could. The forest had always been his refuge, and now it felt even more meaningful. The sound of the stream, the rustle of the trees, and the chirping of birds were no longer just comforting, they were a reminder of how peace could be preserved when people stood firm and acted wisely. One morning, as Tom stepped onto the porch with a warm cup of coffee, he noticed a group of neighbors walking by. They waved, smiling politely. Tom had always kept to himself, but now he felt a new connection. The news of what had happened had spread, and people respected the way he had handled the situation. They admired his calmness and the way he had sought help rather than panic. The cabin, once a simple weekend retreat, had become a symbol of resilience. Tom thought about the imposters who had come to his door, pretending to be law officers. They had underestimated him. They had underestimated the FBI. And they had underestimated the truth. As the weeks went by, the courts processed the HOA leaders' cases. They faced charges of conspiracy, fraud, and impersonation of law enforcement. The imposters had already admitted their roles, and the evidence against the HOA leaders was overwhelming. Tom followed the updates closely, satisfied that justice was being served. In between legal proceedings, Tom spent time improving the cabin. He repaired the fence, planted flowers along the path, and even painted the shed a new color that he liked. It was a reminder that while others might try to control him or intimidate him, he still had the power to live his life on his own terms. One evening, as the sun began to set, Tom lit a fire outside. The flames danced, reflecting in his eyes as he looked around at the quiet forest. He thought about how close he had come to danger, about the imposters at his door, and the chaos that had followed. But he also thought about how calm he had stayed, how he had acted wisely, and how the truth had come out. The forest seemed to breathe with him. The stream gurgled gently, and the trees swayed in the evening breeze. Tom realized that peace was not just about being alone, it was about standing firm, making the right choices, and letting truth and justice prevail. By the time the fire had burned down to embers, Tom felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The cabin was safe. The HOA leaders had been exposed. The imposters had been caught. And he, through patience, courage, and careful thinking, had preserved both his home and his peace of mind. As he closed the cabin door for the night, Tom smiled. The ordeal was over. Justice had been served. And his cabin, nestled in the quiet forest, would remain his sanctuary forever.